How do you choose a watercolor paper? There is a lot of bizarre terminology out there. A lot of you might have a little bit of some questions perhaps. I'm going to break this into sections, so we'll make sure that we do something that says that we're going into section 1. Weight. No, the weight of watercolor paper. So there's the metric and there's the imperial weighting system. We here in the United States use the imperial, which is poundage. A 90-pound watercolor paper is going to be on the thinner side. So how did they come up with that terminology, 90 pounds? I'd like to know. When you take 500 sheets of this particular thickness paper at 22 by 30, which is a standard size, it will weigh 90 pounds. Simple as that. The most common and popular size, 140 pound. You're going to see it's a little bit stiffer. The more stiff your paper is, the less it will buckle on you. If you go really stiff, like a 300 pound, you really don't even have to worry about taping it down at all. Unless you're doing super heavy washes, it'll do just fine. These are the three most common, 90, 140, and 300. Now it's very important to know that just because the paper's thinner doesn't mean it's any less quality. These are all high quality artist grade papers, and we'll get a little bit more into what goes into them. It's just preference. Press, okay? You might have heard this before. Cold press, hot press, rough. What does it all mean? This right here is an example of a hot press paper. It's going to have a smooth finish, more plate than toothy. Texture, toothy. A hot press paper is called that because it was pressed hot, like an iron, like you're ironing a shirt. So what does that mean? Well, let's put some paint on this bad boy. Smooth finish. You're going to see less of the white of the paper kind of shining through it. It's going to have better coverage, okay? Some people think that hot press paper is actually the hardest to work with because they consider it to be a little bit slippery. It's more important to think about, well, what am I trying to paint? So hot press, I think, is good for fine detail work, portraiture, something where you don't really see a lot of bumps. Cold press paper, all right? I'll give you two guesses as to why it's called cold press. Okay, well, that one was wrong. A cold press paper is going to be something that was pressed with like a cold iron, okay? So it has the weight of that press put on it, but there's no heat put on it. Cold press is generally advised for beginner watercolorists because it's kind of in between, but also it's by far the most popular seller. You're going to see that when I do my washes here, you're going to pick up a little bit of that grain of the paper. And if I went with a lighter hand, you might even see some of those bumps, see that, Will? Shine through. Now let's just look at comparison here of that hot press. Smooth, even gradient there. Here you can kind of see the different variances. I'm going to have a harder time getting these little pockets of white, which is something that some people are trying to achieve with a hot press than with a cold press. Finally, and probably the most difficult to understand what the finish is going to be, is the rough. That was a joke. Okay, rough is rough. Because it has that rough texture, there's more like peaks and valleys, nooks and crannies. And you will see here, you see that white coming through? What are some reasons that you'd want a rough paper? I don't know. I mean, maybe you're doing some landscapes. Maybe you just like the way that looks. A lot of things about art is what looks good to you. What do you like? Developing that art attitude. That is the basics of the presses. It's another crisis averted. Next. Let's talk about how different watercolor papers are made, because there is more than one way to skin a cat, and that's a horrible analogy. Let's leave animals alone. The most common in the artist realm is going to be that European mold-made paper. Now this is an example of a mold-made paper. They usually have very nice deckled edges, which are part of the process of making the paper. All right, so this is going to be probably your most common, very durable, good to use. Another one we have here, this is what we call a machine-made paper. Now what you're going to see is there's really not any deckled edges, and the surface itself is going to be completely uniform. There's going to be no discrepancy between this sheet and the sheet underneath it, but it's usually going to be a little bit less durable than this handmade paper, which I'll go to next. Oh, I spoiled it. A handmade paper is going to be the most unique. They're like snowflakes, okay? Each one is an individual sheet made by hand. The beauty's in the imperfection. It's in the subtle nuances of each sheet that makes handmade paper very unique. Okay, can you see that? The most common form of watercolor paper comes in sheet form. Not everybody likes sheet watercolor paper. Ah, sheet. Now, there are other forms of watercolor paper you can get. You can get them in spiral bound travel books. Okay, very nice. These little books that you can bring with you. You can get a bound book. This one is the Nujabi book with this is a handmade paper. And then my favorite, blocks. Okay, blocks are the ones that are bound on the sides. Okay, so that they don't buckle. You don't have to tape them down, because when you are lazy like me, you want it thick. All right, you want it stiff, and you want it to not get wobbly and buckly on you. Now, I asked you guys, does size matter a few weeks ago, okay? A lot of you guys were confused because you thought I might be talking about anything from the size of a brush to the size of my... What is sizing? What are we doing? This is just a sheet of printer paper, okay? I'm going to put on a watercolor wash. Now, we are getting some issues. It is soaking wet so much that I could probably poke my finger through that if I wanted to. What is happening? What's going on? All that water and color and pigment is being absorbed into the paper because it's not protected through sizing. Why am I holding this? Most watercolor papers have two types of sizing, internal and external, okay? The internal sizing is put in during the formation stage. That's going to help with stiffness, and that's also going to help with absorbency prevention. Why don't we want it to absorb? As color absorbs into the paper, it just pulls the color, the life just sucks right out of it. The life just drains from it, and everybody dies, and it's very miserable. Now, the second type of sizing, the external sizing, usually what happens is these sheets of paper actually take a little special bath, okay? Now, I've been in this bath. It's a gelatin bath. They get soaked in gelatin, and that gelatin will be the external sizing, which even helps even more on that absorption, but also for that scrubbing and lifting. Now, I did 1 billion coats on this little sheet of paper, okay? And you can just kind of see the color just stays more vibrant. This is, I don't know why I keep going back to this. The color is nowhere to be seen except for, I guess that was from earlier. They couldn't tell that was on the other side. See that? If you're an artist that's been hoarding, okay, and you've got watercolor paper or all kinds of paper all around you, and you want to know, hey, can I use this for watercolor? Lick the tip. You just lick the tip, okay? I'm trying to educate people. If you lick the tip of the paper and it sticks to your tongue, that means it's absorbing that moisture, okay, and it's not suitable for watercolor. Now, when I lick the tip of this, it doesn't stick to my tongue, okay, because it's sized appropriately for watercolor. And I'm glad something's appropriate around here, because it sure ain't me. Lick the tip, Olivia. Try it. There's more than one corner. If you have any other further questions about watercolor paper, go ahead and ask below. I'd be happy to try to answer a few of you guys individually. If you're not already, follow me on Instagram at MikeNotJerry, where you can probably see some behind the scenes of some of the other things we're doing around here. You never know. And check out our other videos on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. I love you all, especially you, Audrey. I just freaked somebody named Audrey out. I don't know an Audrey.